it's absolutely critical that businesses realize the full potential of the ocean economy. And one area that is often overlooked is both the size and the value of the ocean economy, but also its potential to really help the world to transform and transition to a just and regenerative future. So just in terms of the ocean economy itself, it's large and growing. It's already, even before the pandemic, was estimated to be $2.5 trillion per year. And that's actually the equivalent of the GDP of the world's 8th largest economy. And if you just look at the natural capital of the ocean, and that's, includes, seagrass, mangroves, coral reefs, and, all of the seafood and animals and so on, it's actually $24 trillion in terms of value, but that's just the kind of the economic value. But there's so much more value that the ocean has to offer, and where businesses can really harness the opportunities. And it's really around 3 areas that I'd like to highlight. First of all, the food system opportunities from the ocean, the energy system opportunities, but also shipping and value chain. So just in terms of the food system, so first of all, blue foods, so kind of foods from the ocean are the primary source of protein for around 3 billion people already. And it's really, the consumption of blue foods is really accelerating. And it's 5 times more blue foods have been consumed recently than 60 years ago. And that's really growing. And it's really also expected to grow further. And it's not really just in line with population growth, but exceeding, the same trajectory as population growth. So there's something about blue foods that, in terms of its health benefits and in terms of, its demand for it, that is critical to keep in mind for business. And already aquatic foods contribute about 17% of animal proteins consumed in 2019, and that's 23% actually in lower middle income countries, and more than 50% in parts of Asia and Africa. So it's a critical part of the food system, and actually it could provide, food from the ocean could provide over 6 times more food than it does today, as scientists have shown, and that would be more than 2/3 of all the animal protein that we need for future global population. So the role of business is critical here, because business would need to work, with consumers, with governments, civil society groups, scientists, to really help build a just and regenerative future for blue foods. And the critical pieces here are, first of all, making sure that for example, the aquaculture system, so fish farms, do not replicate, the same kind of patterns, exploitative patterns that we have seen in the agriculture system. So looking, for example, how we produce and, how we produce food from the ocean in terms of the industry around it is very highly concentrated in aquaculture. 39% of aquaculture production and 75% of listed companies are just the top 10 seafood producers. So it's critical to have a more diversified industry, and focusing less on monoculture, but kind of real diversity of species. But it's also critical that that aquaculture investors find the right opportunities and scale to invest in, and really work with different stakeholders, and making sure that consumers, and working with consumers as well, about the impact of the industry and the benefits of the industry, and with fishing communities as well, in terms of the economic barriers to transition to aquaculture. And then, of course, fish feed. And it's critical that businesses and government and civil society work together on sustainable fish feed that is goes beyond the unsustainable fish feeds, such as fish meal, fish oil, land-based soy, corn, and so on. And there are alternatives there. So it's critical that these kind of unjust and unsustainable practices that we have seen in food from the ocean are reversed through working with communities, and also using technology to really serve the purpose of planet and people. When we look at things like data analytics, fish feed, AI, and so on, there's huge opportunity for better transparency and certification. And then if we look at the energy system, we have an ongoing energy crisis, of course, and the ocean has so much potential when it comes to accelerating ocean renewable energies, especially offshore offshore wind, of course. According to the International Energy Agency, global offshore wind capacity could be, could actually be increasing by 15-fold between 2018 and 2040. So it could become a $1 trillion industry over the next 2 decades, and that would really match actually the capital spending on gas and coal-fired capacity over the same period. And of course, the policy targets, technology costs, and all these kind of things are contributing to helping to make this a viable industry. And of course, there's also tidal, stream, and wave energy. There's also energy from the ocean. But these could become a reliable energy source as well, and it's often overlooked as an opportunity. So tidal and wind, for example, could meet about 10% of the EU's energy demand by 2050 with the right regulatory incentives in place. So marine energy is often seen as something that is kind of out of sight, out of mind, but it's actually could be a reliable and resilient source of energy. It's often close to where power is needed. It often requires shorter transmission lines. It could support the grid's reliability and sustainability and resilience. And it can also provide energy to remote coastal and island communities. So it's all these kind of benefits that have often been overlooked. And there's this hype around hydrogen, which of course could really benefit from marine energy because of hydrogen electrolysis, which is kind of really about more versatile energy storage, transmission, and making hydrogen more viable through that as well. And of course, there's also aquavoltaics, which is, as we just talked about, aquaculture, which really combines aquaculture and energy production from the ocean by making use of these kind of photovoltaic technologies that are combined with aquaculture to create these kind of synergies. So aquatic farming together with the benefits of harnessing energy. So it's all these opportunities that could be harnessed for business, communities, civil society, and of course for the sustainability of the ocean. And finally, if we look at how business can really harness the ocean's potential and support the sustainability of the ocean, is through the transformation of shipping and value chains. And already about 90% of all the globally traded goods are travel by sea, and of course shipping is critical for that. And we know that shipping is still very much heavily reliant on polluting fuels, and of course it's one of the biggest emitters in terms of carbon emissions globally. I mean, 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from shipping. So if shipping was a country, global shipping would be the world's 6th largest emitter of carbon dioxide. And of course, there are targets now with the International Maritime Organization and so on, and shipping emissions are supposed to kind of fall to net zero by around 2050. There are huge challenges around that, but also opportunities. I mean, as we know, with the Paris Climate Agreement, there's this goal of limiting global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees by the end of this century. And shipping could play a vital role in that. Of course, there are technological innovations around wind-powered ships, green hydrogen, and so on, alternative fuels. But where the real opportunity lies, and that's of course something that Forum for the Future is very passionate about and very knowledgeable in, is reconfiguring value chains. So it's really the need for just and regenerative value chains. And that really involves business to work with, government, with their supply chains, with the communities and civil society to change the mindset for decisions on, on value chains, including through shipping, which is really focusing, on the long-term well-being of people and nature along the value chains. And shipping is a critical part of that. And really co-creating solutions with all value chain stakeholders, and also sharing data, traceability, transparency. These are key opportunities for business to work with shipping to reconfigure value chains. And as we know now, with in 2023 we had the Science-Based Targets Initiative launching the supplier engagement guidance, for example. And there's also a real push from a lot of kind of global brands to put more pressure on their suppliers to reduce shipping emissions. So the likes, for example, of Amazon and Walmart are now really working with their, with their shipping partners, such as Maersk container ships, to really looking at reducing emissions and really working in harmony with them. So these are huge opportunities. So as I said, there's critical opportunity for business around food, energy, shipping, and value chains to support the sustainability of the ocean economy. Yeah, it's really important that ESG has taken a has recently changed in terms of the trajectory. I mean, one is that there had been a push in the past to focus on requiring companies to disclose the kind of outside-in impacts of society and the environment on their financial performance. So looking at the impact that society on environment and so on has on them. So that's the kind of single materiality. But there's an increasing focus now on what we know as double materiality, which is now looking also at the contribution that business makes and the kind of impact that businesses have on their environment and on society. So it's increasingly that kind of perspective, which is not just kind of that outside in, but also the inside out perspective, and increasingly looking at that kind of forward facing data on progress, which is much more increasingly important. And we can see that now with the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, for example, or the UK's Transition Plan Task Force Disclosure Framework, which launched in 2023, so that really require companies to kind of disclose the most significant inside-out impacts as well on society and the environment. So that's a critical shift that is happening, which is really important. But beyond that, it's really important to look at the purpose of business and the purpose of these disclosure frameworks. And it's critical that ESG doesn't just become a tick box compliance exercise. And there's been a backlash against ESG, both in terms of like the corporate world, for example, in the US, but also a backlash from civil society groups and from those that are concerned that ESG hasn't really been helping to really create real world positive impacts for people and planet. And that is really around the quality of ESG disclosure, and it's not just the kind of the data that is being reported, but it's really about how do we and who holds business to account, and for what reason, for what purpose, and what information do we really need to get to increase the role that business has in terms of building a just and regenerative future. And we are seeing changes in that, and we see encouraging signs that where companies go beyond ESG, where they, for example, look at regeneration, so looking at kind of looking at their whole supply chains and value chains to help, for example, replenish groundwater, or they're looking at things like the living income and so on. So they're looking at environmental and social elements of their supply chains and of their impact. That looks more at justice and regeneration, that goes beyond just the tick box ESG indicators. So it's really important that as the ESG landscape evolves, to really make to make ESG frameworks really transformative and rather than this kind of incremental approach that we have seen, because we know that ESG frameworks and these disclosure frameworks in general, they can really help to facilitate that shift to kind of shared value creation, to stakeholder capitalism that goes beyond just the focus on shareholders, and by really changing who these frameworks are for and for what purpose. And it's also about the need to kind of converge and consolidate these frameworks, because there has been this huge proliferation of disclosure frameworks, and it's really this kind of fragmented landscape that we're seeing, duplication. There's this alphabet soup, And it's critical that that convergence and that consolidation happens in a way that it's really about the purpose of business in society, rather than just this kind of tick box exercise. So, Albert Einstein said you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it. So it's absolutely vital that we look at we look at the mindset that we have and the kind of approach that we have to solving problems, and particularly around the poly crisis, all the kind of the combination of different crises that we have, where we have we have climate change, which is accelerating. We have dying species, where we have loss of nature. We've got plastic waste and other waste, chemical waste mounting. Of course, we've also got social crisis. I mean, growing inequalities. We've got never-ending wars. So these problems are coming together in the poly crisis, and to really be able to address this kind of complex world and the complexity of these interconnected crises, it's important to look at the mindset that we have, that we confront, in which we kind of confront these crises, and building a just and regenerative mindset is critical for that. Because it's really, sometimes we rush to solutions and we don't go back and think about the approach that we have. And really, mindsets are critical because it's really about bringing all of our assumptions, concepts, and values together that kind of inform how we see the world. So if we can transform the way, the way we look at the world, our own mindset and other people's mindsets, and change that from an extractive and exploitative mindset to one that is just and regenerative, we can really start finding solutions that go beyond firefighting problems and realizing, our potential stewards of this planet. So what Forum for the Future has done is, has created the Business Transformation Compass, which really kind of builds on the great work of many practitioners and thought leaders in this space, and particularly, for example, the Regenerative Institute. And there are 4 mindsets, and I just wanted to briefly walk through them to highlight, the potential that we have to change our mindset that can really help us to address the poly crisis. And the first one is the risk mitigation mindset, and there's also the zero harm mindset, the do good mindset, and the just and regenerative mindset. So let's look at these in turn and see what what kind of impact they have. And obviously there are different dimensions to these mindsets. Of course, there's the personal mindset that we have, how we address issues, how we see the world. But you can equally apply that to kind of organizational perspectives, social, political, economic, and natural as well. And although the compass was actually done with business in mind, it can actually be applied to in different contexts. So it can be very, very personal as well, or applied by civil society organizations as well, or even society as a whole. So in terms of the risk mitigation mindset, so this is really about doing less harm for the most efficient outcomes, and it's often about doing really like the minimum necessary. So for example, because of legal compliance reasons, or because there's a need to reduce immediate risk. So there's of course lots of different ways we could look at this. From an individual perspective, for example, this could be around using less water, you're putting your pension into sustainable funds, or buying less stuff in general, and these kind of things. But then there's also the business perspective, which is around measuring sustainability, the ESG focus, looking at how can we measure those kind of indicators, or even things like reducing the gender pay gap, for example, within a business. So these are all important measures, but they're really just on their own, they really just deal with the symptoms rather than the root causes of the poly crisis. So the next mindset is then around the zero harm, which is really about kind of eradicating harmful practices in order to remain resilient, but also being able to kind of remain in the current system in a way. So you might look at, like, at the individual level, you might look at things like repairing, reusing stuff, and these kind of things. But there's also the company level. As a business, what you could do is like offering career advancement opportunities equally to all your employees. For example, you could be committing to zero emissions, or you could stop activities that contribute to deforestation, for example. And there's even like politicians that do certain things that contribute to this. I mean, there's, for example, outlawing ecocide, eradicating harmful practices, and so on. But there's also but it's also really important to highlight for the zero harm mindset. It's really it's not enough really to turn the tide when it comes to the polio crisis. So the next level then is the do good mindset, which is then really about creating a net positive effect to help restore the health of ecosystems, but also societies. So the kind of things that businesses are looking to do is introducing these kind of policies to create a diverse leadership. And of course, if you're a politician, as well, I mean, politicians with do good mindset are unfortunately quite a dying breed. But then you might think of activities like, for example, broadening access to healthcare, education, and these kind of things. And all these activities are critical and crucial, but there's still this limitation around them that these activities might be well intentioned, but on their own, they're really are much more about things like doing things to people rather than with people. So that's why the just and regenerative mindset is really critical, and that's something that Forum for the Future is really passionate about, and that we work towards as part of our mission. And that's really about embracing the power of nature to renew and regenerate. But it's also about understanding that humans are fundamental and a fundamental part of nature, and really respecting everyone's universal rights and potential to thrive. So it's really about this kind of deep, holistic understanding of the systems we're part of, and then also kind of changing or kind of seeking to change the goals of these systems to support regeneration and justice. So, for example, I mean, one thing that we look at a lot in, at Forum for the Future is the food system. So if you think about the food system and people say the food system is broken, then, it might not actually be broken if the goal of the system is extraction, extracting as much food from the soil and ocean as possible. But then if we think about changing the goal, so maybe that the goal of the food system should be around regeneration. You should be about restoring soil health. It could be around animal welfare. It could be around social justice. If we want to change the goals of the system, then then we have to develop a different mindset, and having a just and regenerative mindset can help us to look at the the goals of the systems around us. And it's critical that as part of this mindset, we look at the systems around us as living phenomena that we are actually part of. So realizing that you are part of that system, as part of your business, as part of your society and organization, and so on, and then really creating new patterns of behaviors that can help to change the system in which we're part that we're part of. And with this kind of mindset, you have a sense of control. You have a sense of empowerment. You have a sense of agency within your systems. And of course, there are companies that have embraced this kind of mindset. If we look, for example, at the natural body and hair care brand Faith in Nature, they have actually given a seat at the board table to them. So there's a board member seat explicitly for nature. And that's of course a huge advancement in that respect. And there's the Networks program, and of course, because I'm very passionate about the ocean, this is a really critical example as well in terms of ocean sustainability. And this Networks program was developed by the carpet manufacturer Interface, and they kind of help local residents in coastal communities to collect and sell discarded fishing nets that are then turned into carpet tiles. So this is a great example of kind of supporting the local economy, but also the environment. And actually, interestingly, there are also some countries that have embraced this just and regenerative mindset. For example, Panama. Panama has granted rights to nature, for example, and then there is Bhutan, which has embraced the concept of a well-being economy, which measures gross national happiness actually as the most important metric for the country rather than gross domestic product. So what all these approaches have in common is really to kind of this desire to enable the system to kind of realize a greater potential in a kind of self-sustaining and positively reinforcing way. So it's critical to look at your mindset, your organization's mindset, in terms of building a just and regenerative future.